Hi, everybody. Welcome. Happy New Year to you, and thank you for coming out on this cold night. I'm Joan Bressler from the Greater Philadelphia Film Office, and we're very excited to bring this program to you tonight. Thanks to the Prince always as our host, and I also want to shout out my coworker Amira Smith, who's back there, who designed this and you know does our outreach and is our multicultural affairs director and you know everything wonderful. Also, Sharon wanted me to send her regrets. She's at a meeting at City Hall trying to make everything tax credit-wise fabulous. She's going to stop by if she can, but could not reschedule. So
yeah, because tax credits will mean more movies made here.
Yes.
That's right.
And less than Atlanta.
Right. And that's what we're all going for. Okay, I want to welcome the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle. You guys, if I'm not mistaken, got started maybe 6 months ago or maybe in June, something like that. It's an organization of dedicated and talented film critics from Philadelphia and surrounding counties with a mission to promote awareness of the film industry to the wider viewing audience through engaging commentary, discussion, and education. The PFCC is also committed to doing what they can to advance both Philadelphia's rich film history and as well as its thriving film festivals and events. So welcome, spread the word. These guys are going to be doing a lot of stuff, hopefully, with us. So we're so glad to have you. I'm going to use your table here. I want to introduce our panelists. Rich Heimlich is right here. Rich is the co-founder of PFCC. He's written professionally since 1985, and he's covered film since 2006. He invented Slash Chart, which he's going to tell us about, which is a new way of evaluating the movie viewing experience. He's written several books, including the best-selling Sound Blaster book series. Here's another one for you. Welcome, Rich. Dan Tabor. Dan is the arts and entertainment editor for Greek Adelphia, where he's been covering the Philly film scene for over 8 years. He's also a staff writer at synapse.co. Co, is that how you say
yeah.
that? Synapse.co. And when he's not writing about film, he's programming and making films in and around Philadelphia. Next to him will be Mike Dennis.
Yes.
He's running a little late, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mike Dennis because he's just going to slip in there. Over 20 years of experience as a filmmaker, a critic, and a festival curator. He holds a BFA from New York University and an MFA from American Film Institute. In 1999, he founded Real Black, a film company dedicated to creating and promoting good movies about black folks. So we'll welcome Mike soon, very soon, I hope. Steve Silver is the other co-founder. The two of you are the co-founders, correct? Yes. Of this organization. Steve is based in Philadelphia, and he's been writing movie reviews since 1996. He's a film critic and a web producer for Fox 29, and was the former film critic and entertainment editor for Technology Tell. His work has also appeared in Philadelphia Magazine, Philly.com, Boston Magazine, Screen Rant, New York Press, Patch, the Detroit News, and other outlets. And he maintains a blog, stevesilver.net. So this is our round table that's long, so bear with us with that, but these guys are just going to take it away and enjoy.
You forgot Carrie.
Carrie! Carrie!
How did Carrie's our intern?
Yeah. Carrie's learning. Hopefully you'll learn something tonight. Carrie's film credits include The Village Voice, The Boston Herald, and The Philadelphia Inquirer. I think you all know her work and her name, and probably her face. She served on numerous juries, including the New York Film Festival. She's included in the book Feminists Who Changed America for chronicling the work and the progress of women artists and filmmakers in articles and catalog essays. She has also contributed to The Power of Feminist Art and the Rolling Stone Illustrated History of Rock and Roll, among many others. Welcome, Carrie. Welcome, all of you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out on this incredible spring day. At least it seems that way, which is great. I wanted to talk just a minute about why we did this and membership. The members here, when I was traveling around the country, I was taken aback by the fact that everywhere I went, people, I would tell them I'm from the Philadelphia market. I live in South Jersey. I lived in Center City for a number of years. And I would talk to different people, and they, talk about film, and they would say, film? Philadelphia? What? And they seem confused by this concept. And yet, coming back here and working with the members that I work with, you could see this incredible passion. You could see an unbelievable command of language, communication, passion for storytelling, and last but not least, film. Everybody around here, I was just blown away by the amount of talent that we had here in Philadelphia compared to every other city that I've been to. And I've been to most of the large cities in the country and outside, and people just did not equate Philadelphia with film in any way, shape, or form. When you look at number of screens per square mile, Philadelphia ranks third. We're behind the two obvious ones. We're ahead of Chicago. We're ahead of virtually everywhere else, and yet I would travel to places like Santa Fe, New Mexico, and find that they have 2 film critics groups. There were 2 in Hawaii. You can't even go to see films in Hawaii. I don't know how they're getting screeners, how they're going to see these films, but they had 2 film critics groups, and Philadelphia did not have one. So, when I kind of came to this group in 2006 and started writing, it was one of my first questions was, why don't we have one of these? And everybody seemed to want one, but there just wasn't that inertia to kind of get going. It was a little, everybody wanted it, but it just didn't happen. So finally, Steve and I just got kind of to be blunt, a boiling point and said, this has to happen. And thank God we met people like Carrie and other people that you may know, Stephen Ray, before this, and talked to everybody and just said, let's make this happen. And by and large, everybody said, let's make it happen. So that's what we did. We started up the whole thing back in May.
We first started talking about it 5 years ago. But
yeah.
When we really got going on it in March or April, and we worked on it for a couple months, and then finally announced it, I think, in June, and then did our first awards last month.
Yeah, last month. And people will ask me, well, why did you do this? And it's the obvious answers. There is true power in numbers. Prior to this, as I mentioned, Santa Fe, they were getting screeners. They were getting studios responding to them. They were getting people who say, hey, we know who your film critics are. And yet in Philadelphia, here we have some of the best talent, and people were not aware of this. So by forming the group, we were able to bring power and numbers to this effort. So now that we put out our yearly awards, the first annual one this year, all of a sudden the community started looking up and going, oh, Philadelphia. And if there's anything studios like, it's another chance to put another award up on a poster. So, they're very glad to have us aboard. And, our goal here, as Joan so nicely said, we want to bring awareness of Philadelphia film history, film community to the entire world, certainly the U.S. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. So hopefully you can help spread the word. When you go to a theater, all of you guys, I've seen many of these faces around at the theaters. That we're a passionate city for movies. Everybody here cares. There's a reason we're third in screens per square mile. It's not just population. We care about the films we see. We talk about it with everybody. So, hopefully you read what we put out or you watch what we do. If you're not aware, we do a podcast every Sunday at the Old Bar called Film Scribes. You can Google it and find our podcast, and you'll hear any one of the group of us and more talking about films every week. Generally, you can get the new one on Tuesday, roughly.
Yeah, and it's on iTunes as well.
So today we want to just kind of jump in and do a little bit to talk about how you get into film criticism, what our jobs are like. A lot of people, it's probably one of the neatest things that we're in high demand at parties, as you can imagine. Everybody wants to talk about movies, and everybody thinks we have the greatest job on earth. Which we're going to knock that down a bit here, I think, tonight. But also talking about how we get into it, how you get into it, what you need to look for, what you need to be aware of, and then beyond that, we'll talk about things like what makes for a great film. So we're going to kind of do an open podcast here for the beginning of this and let us talk about it, and then at the end we'll do a QA session and ask us anything. So anybody want to take the lead here?
Well, I'm interested to know the story behind Santa Fe having 2 critics groups. I'm going to guess there's some story involving there was one and then it split into feuding factions and others too. But,
that's usually the reason.
I didn't know about that. So yeah, we Rich and I were talking for a long time about either doing a podcast or starting a critics group, and of course we ended up doing both. So we're lucky to have had the chance to do that. So I started writing about film when I was in college about 20 years ago, or I guess, yeah, a little more than 20 years ago now. I was on my college newspaper, and I was also taking intro to film classes at Brandeis University in Boston. And I went to the college newspaper office, and first I wanted to write about sports, and I realized that involved covering, volleyball games, and I wasn't so into that. But then I went to the art section meeting, and they said, well, you can go review movies and go to an early screening. I'm like, I think I'll do that instead. So I did that. I kind of fell in love with it. The first movie I ever reviewed was a Hugh Grant thriller called Extreme Measures, which is completely forgettable. Rich probably remembers it, but
one of my pet movies.
Yeah, of course. Gene Hackman played the villain in it, and that was there's nothing I remember about that movie other than that it was the first movie I ever reviewed. So just kind of stuck with that for all of college, and then I went to New York, lived there for a while as a writer. I did a little bit of web writing in the early days of the web, and wasn't really for money or anything like that. But then I came to Philly in 2005 and got a job at a newspaper. And I said to them,
Which newspaper?
It was called The Trend Leader. It was actually owned by it was part of the Broad Street Community News section. It was owned by the whatever company owned the Inquirer at the time, and I think it got sold a couple times during the 2 years I was there. But so I asked them, is there a film critic? And they're like, no. Do you want to be the film critic? I said, sure, I'll do it. And then I actually emailed Stephen Ray and asked him, how do I get in touch with Allied Reps? And he told me, and I got in touch with the Allied Reps, and here I am all these years later.
Allied is the company that represents the studios in Philadelphia.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're very appreciative of the help they've given us this year, last year with starting the group and really coming through for us with screenings.
Yeah,
and
if you're
everything.
curious, look up Allied online. You'll see that they handle the studios in every major and many
every major
minor
market,
city.
yeah.
They're all over the country, and that's mainly because the studios, of course, don't want to deal with 43 people from each individual city, so they have this one organization that is their front.
Right.
And in Philadelphia we have 2 or 3, correct? Or is it just the 2 with promotions group and?
We have a couple of them. We had more at one point. We had Terry Hines.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
had
they merged with Allied.
Yeah, they merged with Allied, and now we have just Allied and Promotions Group, and we have a couple of people that cover the film gamut from like New York that kind of like bleeds into here. So you got a little bit of that as well.
If you see us at an open screening, you will often see us getting stopped at the door by somebody with a clipboard or something, and Carrie will do her best to get out of there as soon as possible.
They want to know our reactions to films, and I just say I haven't thought about it enough yet because writing is thinking, and
I can't tell you how many times I've told the rep, I kind of like this film, and went home and thought about it and went, boy, I really don't like that film. and meanwhile, now your notes have gone out.
That's called a hot take when you just walk out of a movie and you're the first thing you think of. In, I guess, online writing and sort of internet writing, everything's about being first. I guess I'm the internet guy here.
Same here.
But yeah, it's always about being first. I like
Dan, everything is internet now. You're not alone.
Oh, okay.
Tell your story.
I'll tell my story. I actually moved to Philadelphia because of the film scene. I'm big into exploitation and genre stuff. I lived in southern Pennsylvania for most of my life, and I heard about this organization called Exhumed Films that were showing like repertory, old horror, old exploitation, old like sort of movies that weren't. This was before it was cool to play old movies in movie theaters, and I moved to Philly.
When was it not cool?
It kind of. I mean.
It was cool, then it wasn't,
Yeah, now it's cool again. It's kind of like the Draft House, and then everybody's.
It's been cool for my whole life,
market.
Dan, and I'm old.
It kind of falls in and out a little bit.
Okay.
But so I moved to Philly because I saw this group, and they were showing lots of cool stuff. And I was reading this blog called Geekadelphia, and they never wrote about movies. And one day I wrote to the guy who ran Geekadelphia, Eric Smith, who's now is like famous writer guy, and was like, hey, do you need anybody to cover film? Because I want to write about all the film stuff in Philadelphia that you're not writing about on the site. And he was like, oh, sure. So I wrote on the site probably for about almost 9 years. For the first 2 or 3 years, like I just covered stuff that I saw. And then after a while, I got contacted by the studios and was like, hey, do you want to go see a movie before it comes out and write about it? And I was like, holy crap, I made it. And it was The Fourth Kind. So be careful what you wish for, kids. Yeah. But yeah, that was my Fourth Kind. Was the first one I actually got to see for free and all that stuff. But since then, it's just been like a uphill, like, you know, it's a lot of work. That's the one thing I always tell people. You have a lot of people that, like, especially with blogging, because blogging is so easy. You just open a page, you type it in, and you hit publish. It's on the internet. The problem is how do you get people to read it? How do you get people to see it? And then keeping that up every week after week, because the one weird thing about, like, kind of like in Philadelphia about being a writer, the thing that's actually cemented me was the fact that I just never stopped. Was the fact that I just kept writing and writing and writing when, you know, the blog would turn over because people would be like, oh, I can't get rich doing this. Let me go do something else. And the next crop would come in. They would find out it's hard because it's not easy to sit down and you have to dedicate, like, my Sunday is pretty much, I spend about 2 or 3 hours just knocking out my reviews. And then that is my Sunday. And then you got to think about the time that you watch the movies and all that other stuff and more if, like, say you're watching, like, more than one.
Well, and if you take somebody like James, one of our members, who's probably one of the more prolific writers of the group.
The most prolific film critic in America, I would say. He sees everything.
I mean, James is writing something every single day, at least one piece a day, every day. And so that's he's on realviews.net. And if you go to realviews.net, you'll see that. And that's how he gets his audiences. There's something fresh there every day. I've been, you know, as we've talked, I've been writing for decades, and I don't know how he does it. You know, you have to be in that kind of mindset. You've got to be in that creative mode.
Passion too. You have to love what you're doing. And that's the big thing. You can write a bunch of crap and just stick it on the web, but the studios are going to read that. All these organizations are going to read that, and if they don't see any love or any passion, you know, they're not going to want to have you write about their stuff, and they're not going to reach out to you or anything. You got to write about what you love and kind of focus on what you love. And we're
this
lucky
is Mike D here. Just sorry.
That's all right. You made it.
Hey, is it on? Did you cut my mic already? Or?
No, you're good.
Film movie fans. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Do you want to jump in, or do you want to catch up?
I don't know what you're talking about.
How we got here.
How do we get? I just crossed the bridge and got here. I have no idea. I'm not. Well, did you finish?
No, go ahead. We're just kind of explaining how we.
I guess we're recording this, right? Yeah. So that was the whole purpose of me being late. I'm really amazed that we all ended up in the same place, and we have this film critic circle, and we're getting retweeted by Jordan Peele and all these people. You know, it's just a reflection of the love we have for movies. But I don't write every day, and. You know, I mean, compared to these guys, I'm a specialist. I'm like the proctologist or the herpes doctor or something, you know.
Well, that's not true because of you and your strategic partnerships with people like Array. You bring movies to Philadelphia that we otherwise wouldn't see.
Yes.
Movies like the early Ava DuVernay movies. I mean, come on. And
okay, all right.
You are vital. That's not proctology.
If you can't tell, Mike is our extrovert.
I'm certainly. I'll be humble. Yeah. So just trying to get people excited about movies as much as we are, because I mean, Lord knows we don't get paid to do it, or don't get paid as much as we should.
Right.
But we did get cool perks every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I host a TV show. I started it 11 years ago. And we've interviewed a lot of people, like she said, Carrie has said, that have gone on to greater fame and are starting to be game changers. And but I can't watch every movie that comes out. It's like, who can? So I think
there are people who do.
Yes. Brian.
Brian Fleeter, yes.
That's a funny question. How many movies have each of us watched last year?
About 300.
I saw 240 2017 releases, which is the most I've seen.
Yeah.
But I think Brian Fleeter broke 300. In other years, I know it is.
I did 309.
If you count the films...
I'm sure James Bernardinelli has seen 500 last year.
And so Brian, counting the stuff he's seen at home, is over 600 this year. And to give you an idea, there are about 2,200 films a year that come out. So I just got my hair cut, and the hairdresser was like, "So, do you see every film that comes out?" And God, no. You know, that's physically impossible. I think Ebert one year said that his high was over 400, but those were reviewed.
I think the most anybody's ever watched is like 1,200. I think that's in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's
that would be 4 a day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a film festival every flipping day. There's
there's the list that the Oscars brings out of like Oscar eligible movies, and that's about 300 and something, I think.
Has anybody caught up with this, or? All right, we're kind of inside. I think we've lapped everybody, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we get to see everything. We get to see it early, and we get to tell you what to go see, and you can like our opinions, or you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the best thing about film criticism is you kind of latch on to people that you admire and people whose tastes are their own, and you start to follow them and say, okay, this person liked this, so I'm probably going to like this. And that's kind of how I follow film critics that I sort of like look up to. It's the people that say, okay, he liked this movie, but I didn't think that was going to be that great, so let me give this movie a chance.
Yeah, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but when I get into a cab, one of the worst questions I hate, and I would guess that we probably are on the same boat, is, so what's a great film that I should see?
Oh, the answer to that is, what's the last movie that you really liked?
Exactly.
That's the answer, and then you can...
Everybody thinks we're some oracle, that we will just send you home to Netflix and you'll have an amazing evening. And it's like, no, we have to find out what you like. And my advice to anybody would be find a reviewer whose style and views that you tend to agree with and stick with that. So Siskel and Ebert, of course, were famous forever. And I tended to find that I really sided with Gene Siskel most of the time.
Me too.
And I could always tell when Roger was on a film that he was excited about that I would just hate this film. And, lo and behold, that generally happens. Another thing that's changing our industry that I'll talk about for just a minute is Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes, I happen to be both a fan and...
why don't you describe what it is for the people who don't know?
Does anybody here not know what Rotten Tomatoes is? Okay, Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregate site. They basically take all of the a number of reviewers who are in, and most of our members are in Rotten Tomatoes. They will take those and aggregate those scores together. They'll come up with a score and say 92% of people. So, for example, the current Star Wars had a 94. I was one of those in the 6%.
Or like Lady Bird had 100 until that one guy wrote a negative review.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, one guy,
That one guy.
And there's this interesting thing that goes on where the studios are lamenting this, but in many ways it's also driving business to them, so they misunderstand how Rotten Tomatoes works.
Well, it's owned by the business.
Yes.
The industry owns Rotten Tomatoes, and they put ads everywhere you go.
Wait, isn't it owned by Amazon?
No, it's Warner Brothers owns a stake, and I think Disney. I don't remember which. It's a bunch of the big conglomerates that also own movie studios.
But like most things, when you dig beneath the surface, you find out it's basically a data thing. So whenever I see a film, here's a tip for Rotten Tomatoes. So many of my friends would go, "Oh, I went to see this film. It got a 98 on Rotten Tomatoes, and I hated it." And I go, "Well, how many people were that 98?" And I don't know. And you go home and you see this film, and you see, well, 32 reviewers all gave it a glowing score, and one guy said no. So it got a 98, whatever. It's forgive my math.
There's another aggregator called Metacritic.com, which is a little bit better, for my taste.
You need to talk about how you got started, Carrie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My parents were immigrants to the United States. Movies were a really big deal in our house because the movies were where my family learned how to be American, how to dress and how to talk slang. And we would see movies every week. And I started out at college as I wanted to be a literature major. I actually wanted to be a poet. And a very famous poet named Adrienne Rich came to my university, and I was her student guide. And I told her how much I wanted to be a poet and how much I admired her. And she said, "Honey, poets publish, one book every couple of years and sell 900 copies, so you have to find a day job." She said, "What's your passion? What do you love to do?" And I said, "Well, I really like movies." And she said, "Find a job as a movie critic that pays." And I thought that was really good advice because I'd seen a lot of movies. and I also ran a movie theater and programmed it. And so I started this when I was 19 for a local newspaper called the La Jolla Light, which was near my university. And I just kept on getting jobs doing it because I had clips. So I grew up in the heroic era of newspapers. And so if you had samples of your work, you got hired by other newspapers because they knew that you could write on deadline, and that was kind of important. And I came to Philadelphia in 1986 to write for the Inquirer, which at the time was really one of the two top newspapers in the country. And I left in 2011 when it had cut back a lot. And I still think it's one of the better newspapers in the country, but it just doesn't have any resources. Mm-hmm. And because the internet killed newspapers. So now I freelance, and the options that were open to me really don't exist anymore, or exist in a very limited way, because the people who design sites pay tech people, but they think content should be free. Mm-hmm. And that's not right. So I write for sites that actually pay me.
Mm-hmm. Well, to touch on that, so that people know what we're talking about, back, I've been writing since the 80s, and I used to get paid $1 a word. And I remember when I got a raise and went up to $1.25 a word. And some of us have had literary agents. If you write books, you tend to get into that. And so I had this agent who got me this big raise, and I thought, at that time, kind of young and thinking this is just going to go on forever, and it's going to get better and better. And then I was syndicated to newspapers, and I was in over 20 papers. And I wrote a tech column. So my last name is Heimlich. I wrote a column called Heimlich Maneuver. And yes, it's in the family. We're a very small clan. And if any of you are choking, just raise a hand. I'll catch you. But Marnie and I, my wife is sitting here. We just got married, and we actually had somebody choking at our wedding. And my entire family of Heimlichs did nothing. Amazing story. But anyway.
My last name is Silver, and as a film critic, I've had a column or segment called The Silver Screen 5 different times.
Yeah.
Wow. I know, go ahead.
So basically, now I'm getting paid the same amount of money for every paper. And the money's rolling in, and I'm thinking, God, this is easy. I write one thing, and it gets syndicated out, and you're making all this money, and it'll go on. And then the Detroit Free Press said, we're not doing this anymore. And I thought, okay, one down, big deal. Within a year, they were all gone. Within 1 year.
What year was that, about 2000?
Before that, it was 1998, 99, somewhere around there. And, so the .com thing was taking off. That was really starting to hurt everybody. And boom, I just went, okay, this is bad. And my co-writer and I said, we're done. We're out of this. And by the time I finished, I think I was down to something like 10 cents a word. And, today there are people who are being paid $500 a review, something like that. And now there are places offering $20, $50 a review.
Yeah.
And, so this is not something you want to get into if the idea is to drive around in a Seville.
Yeah, most of us have day jobs. I know I personally have a day job, and I started writing because I loved movies, and it basically comped my entertainment budget. I consume a lot of media, a terrifying amount of media, and this kind of fed the beast. And that's why what keeps me writing is the beast gets fed. I keep watching movies. I'm happy. I keep seeing more movies. I keep writing about movies. So it's a vicious cycle. Luckily, my significant other is also big into movies, too, so she's kind of okay with it. But yeah.
Mine does a good job of lying about it. She just puts up with it. So that's another thing. But most of our significant others, Carrie's husband, I rarely see at screenings.
I think the last screening he went to was Moulin Rouge because he has a thing for Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, oddly, believe it or not, one of our biggest issues is getting people to come to screenings with us. So, it's actually a thing. We'll talk to our friends, and they all go, oh, my God, we'd love to go. And then nobody has time. And it's like, what, you can't go on a Friday night? No, it's Tuesday afternoon. What are you doing? Oh, I have a job. Oh.
Yeah, actually, I know this guy. Hey, man. Long time no see. But that's a good thing. But that brings me back. It's like Total Recall. All of a sudden, I got my first job as a film critic was at the Centralizer, Central High School newspaper, and that's I was like I should have been the entertainment critic, but I was too lazy, so I just wrote reviews, and I would write the different record labels to get records and things like that, and that's what connected me with Anne Marie at Allied. Like so, when I came back to Philly from film school and all that, it was I guess Spiro and Associates or something.
Oh yeah! Oh my God!
So
we're talking 30 years ago.
Easily, yeah. So I was writing movie reviews like for Top Gun. Those were like the early screenings I was at, like Top Gun and Fear City and
That's 1986.
Blue City or whatever, all that Paramount stuff Anne Marie handled. So it's in your blood, and then it just kind of comes out every once in a while. So when but I utilize the channel basically to supplement my education. Yeah. Like you walk in a room with a camera or a pen or something, you can ask anything you want. I mean, that's like extra film school for me. So and we just did the jump.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like I also do the interviews as well because you touched on it a little bit. I mean, if you love film, and it's one of those things where you're more likely to get paid for interviews rather than reviews. I do interviews for a site called Synapse in Austin, Texas, and I do interviews for just about any site that'll pay me. But because interviews are nobody likes to do interviews because if you're doing them for the web, you have to do a lot of transcription, and a lot of people don't like that. But see, I've been doing them for like 9 years.
Can I give you a secret?
What?
Don't take a tape recorder. Do it all by hand. No transcription problems.
I can't. Dan is hermetically connected to his tape recorder. I can't.
Oh, I wish I could do it. No, I'm really good at on my train ride. I just bang everything out on my train rides. But like it's given me access to Aaron Sorkin. Like I've been able to ask Aaron Sorkin what I've thought of, what he imagined.
Does he talk like his dialogue?
He snuck it. He kept on sneaking in Coke jokes, which was really weird.
Like
it was really inappropriate. And that's the thing. Sometimes people get really inappropriate. It's really funny.
Does he make you walk when you do an interview?
Yeah.
No. But yeah, like I've gotten access to all kinds of crazy celebrities who I've never thought, and people have contacted me because I'm on Twitter, and they'll be like, "Hey, would you like to talk about my movie? I saw you tweet about my movie." And I'm like, "Sure." So, and you get to pick those people's brains and find out what sort of like motivated them to do X amount in a scene or Z amount in a scene. Or like, for like the weirdest thing was I interviewed Alex Winter from like Bill and Ted. And I had read the novelization when I was a kid. And there was all this stuff in the novelization that wasn't in the film. And when I asked him about that, he like had a brain aneurysm. He couldn't believe that somebody had read the novelization of Bill and Ted and was asking him about it. And then it got to this whole discussion about all these scenes that were cut out, that were shot, that they never finished the CG or the special effects on. So, I mean, and that ended up on Wikipedia because nobody had asked him that question before. But being able to pick those people's brains is like, you couldn't pay for that film school. Like you couldn't put a price on those experiences.
I can give you a funny one that's going to put me in a really bad spot. Anybody see the film Best Enemies documentary on Gore Vidal William F. Buckley, and love this film. It's a great documentary, and we got a chance to interview the director, and we sat down, and Piers was there, and we're kind of talking to him, and. To prepare for this, of course, I went and saw the film again, and then I happened 2 nights before, just out of complete luck, Netflix ran a documentary on the same subject. And, so I went, I should see this to get some perspective, and I saw it. And somehow at 53, a neuron fired and got stuck. And I'm talking to the director, and we're going back and forth, and I'm explaining this brilliant scene he did. And I wanted his background, and sure enough, it was from the Netflix documentary. And he looked at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I managed to get through it, but he kept emailing me going, I really want to understand what that scene was. And I kept going, I'll have to look again, but I'm so busy. So that went on for about two months, and finally he stopped emailing, so I'll have to not interview him again.
Can I ask 2 questions? One, of the audience. Why are you here? First off, we're geeking out.
Good question.
But I mean, like, are people interested in what we're doing? Are you
Raise your hand if
you.
you'd like to write about film.
Okay.
We got one, two.
Two.
Okay, so
3.
So the secret to that is you just make phone calls. You show up. If you get passes to a screening,
And you just
talk to
write.
the
You have to
person.
write a lot.
Yeah.
You have
Well,
to just
yeah.
keep writing. But nowadays you can, like, if you want to write a vlog, you can write a vlog, or I mean, make a vlog, make videos. Like, there's some. That's the one thing that people have at their fingertips these days that, you know, a lot of us didn't. Is now there's so many different outlets to get what you want out there, and nowadays it's not just about being like critics; it's about being an influencer. And that's, you're going to hear that a lot, is like people who influence as opposed to actually writing about a movie, people who are on Twitter who just talk about things, and people will follow Twitters.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key is finding your niche where the void is, and then just being persistent about it. Like, it's not a secret right now as we speak. There's a screening of Phantom Thread
Downstairs.
happening
Yes.
downstairs. There's a
Thank
guy
you for
with-
choosing this over
Yes.
that.
There's a guy with a clipboard. If you really want to review movies, you just talk to the guy with the clipboard and you say, hey, how can I get in on this? Because companies like Allied or all the studios, they just need hits. Not everybody's gone through NBC and CBS anymore, Inquirer or whatever. So if you can just provide a resource, and PhillyCam's a great outlet as well because it's considered broadcast. You know, so I get a lot of interviews just on the strength that the show's going to be seen at the same time. You know, same bat channel on PhillyCam.
But Allied's still going to ask, like, what are your numbers? Like, they're still going to say, what are your numbers? So you're going to have, not only you're going to have a voice, but you're going to have a platform. Because they're going to give you the access if you have the platform and if you've achieved the voice.
To give you quick numbers so that it might help you, as we talked about in the beginning, I had written for 30 years, but I didn't get into film criticism, and I've been writing about films forever, but I didn't officially start doing it until 2006. I couldn't get into Allied until 2011.
Right.
So, you know, you have to have that backlog there. You can't write 8 reviews for anybody and then show up at Allied and say, let me in.
Yeah.
And then depending on certain things, they'll say, well, what are your numbers? Or can you run this here? Can you run this there? Because, you know, the bigger the access, the bigger they get, they're going to want something, they're going to want more eyes on it.
Right. Or just pay to see the movie and do, like, I guess there's a guy, Jody. There are a lot of people that just do YouTube things where they review trailers.
Well, Letterboxd is a really good outlet for that, too. Letterboxd is a site for logging your films that you watch. And a lot of people write reviews on Letterboxd. And people make lists of movies that are all like certain funny lists, or lists where an actor does the same thing in all the movies. And that's a really good aggregate tool where you can kind of get your training wheels and just sort of start writing reviews, because people will start following you on Letterboxd if you review a bunch of stuff or if you rate a bunch of stuff, and you can kind of find your voice there.
Right. But, I'm just saying, you don't even need to really write with a pen and paper now.
No.
You just
So, well,
put a camera in front of yourself and say, I love this, I hated this, this is what I like, and throw it up on YouTube. And if you're consistent, that's cool. But the second question I had was just for us. Like, I have this theory that movies start to suck when you don't have the perfect triangle between audience, critic, and studio. Like, there's a certain point where you could, after Siskel and Ebert, where like thumbs up was a big thing, and those guys were legitimate influencers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when they sort of lost their breath, it seemed like you could just kind of buy critics. You know, you could get any kind of quote put on your poster.
Really?
Well,
I
that's
felt
when
like
that's when the Sony thing started, and the fake
well, no,
David.
that's-
You could get somebody.
There
to
was a
show up
fake
and
critic that
Oh,
that Sony made up, whose name was, I
Well,
think David
David
something.
Yeah.
Something.
Harry Knowles is kind of in that whole thing
Oh,
because
yeah, let's talk about Harry Knowles.
This is Ain't It Cool News.
Ain't It Cool
Yes.
News, which is a big part of our story. But go ahead.
well, yeah, like, you know, the studios, that was when when the studios figured out what fandom could do for them. And it started out where it was just some guy in his basement who was passionate about movies. He had hurt his back, and he just wrote about the stuff he loved. And what happened was the studio started to court him. And the studio started to fly him out to previews, or fly him out here, or take him there. And it kind of became a weird system that has evolved and devolved into kind of what we have today. Because they want that sort of like, they want that curated sort of like passion behind these reviews, that Harry Knowles would do, but it's like to get that is kind of hard.
Well, and you could, I'm going to ask a trick question. How many of you in the audience have seen Frozen? Yeah, not the right film I'm talking about. There's a 2011 film called Frozen that's about some horror on a ski lift.
Adam Green from Hatchet directed that.
Which, to show you how goofy this plot is, the ski resort closes on the weekend because it's the weekend. Which that's how accurate this film is, that the ski resorts close on the weekend. But, on the poster and all over was Harry Knowles, Ain't It Cool News, best film you could see this year. And my whole review was about Harry. Well, and just this coverage of this horrible,
I think he was
film.
kind of corrupted, and that's one thing. If you're going to write about film, you've got to kind of separate church and state a little bit, because the thing that got Harry Knowles was the fact that he built relationships with these filmmakers, and he let that influence what he was writing. You got to kind of separate the two a little bit. Like there's movies that I love where I've hated the director, and there's movies that I've hated where I've loved the director, and I didn't know why they did that movie.
Rich, go ahead.
Well, the problem I always had with the Ain't It Cool News was that the house style and the style of the writing there was just the worst of maybe any website that's ever existed. It was just, these reviews would be 2,000 words long, and the first 1,000 words would be about what the critic did that day before they got to the movie theater. And it was just not very knowledgeable. I mean, some of the people...
I've actually written for Ain't It Cool News.
No offense to you. And some good writers came out of there. Drew McWeeny wrote for that site, and he ended up being a very respected film writer. But that site, they were kind of doing it when no one else does, and when no one else was doing it.
And that's the benefit of originality. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
being there first is a big deal.
And then some other sites emerged in the years following and kind of became better places for people to read better film criticism. And then there was the whole thing where Harry Knowles turned out to be, accused of sexual abuse by multiple women, and
Well, that's
a whole other issue.
that's gossip.
But I mean, those in the
it's real.
audience, those in the audience who are starting now, you have to kind of look at the context now. You have a lot of tools at your disposal. Movies are a visual medium, and some of the best movie criticism I've ever seen have been video essays about movies where the writer can talk about how a shot kind of crystallizes the whole plot of a movie or the whole meaning of a movie. And those are beautiful because you kind of get into it by the visual element. Also, I teach a lot, and what I always tell my students who want to get into criticism is I think you have to master multiple platforms. You have to write for the ear, which is radio. You have to write for the eye, which is print. You have to be able to harness visual media, which is maybe doing segments for TV or YouTube. And I mean, it's easier to break in now because you don't really need a newspaper as an imprimatur. You can do your own stuff, and I have a blog which I don't really use a lot anymore, and a lot of people want me to expand it and get movie ads, and I just think I don't want to do that because I don't want to feel that's a church and state issue.
Yeah.
I really don't want to get money from studios I'm criticizing, and it's too weird. But what I can do is use Facebook or Twitter, use my Facebook account and my Twitter account to just do top-of-head reactions to movies, and write out my first drafts of reviews, and talk to other movie geeks about what they think and strike up conversations. And I think one of the things that was great about Ebert and Siskel is that they were very different, and their conversations about movies gave you multiple ways into talking about a movie. And I find that social media is a really good way to discuss movies.
Well, and that's one of the things that you could tell. I think all of us have had this experience. Just take Siskel and Ebert. If you watched them on The Tonight Show back in the day, you could tell that they were awesome film reviewers, and not, you're not reading anything from them there, but you could see the passion, and you could see that they had an eye for it. You could hear their stories, and what I would probably suggest is, if you're one of those people that people go, wow, they can tell a good story, this is probably a good thing for you. We've had numerous people come up to us over the years who say, I want to get into this. And, you'll start talking about something and pick a film, Braveheart. And, what did you think of Braveheart? It was good. Yeah. Well, what did you like about it? It was good. This is not a good film critic.
Yeah, you kind of have to have
sure they will
the nuts and bolts behind why you have that opinion, and you have to be able to defend it and kind of go down with the ship if need be.
Which, if anybody heard our podcast, Dan and I just had one on Star Wars.
I still think I won that fight. I think I won it.
I let you believe that.
Well, Carrie brought up something great, and that is visual essays. And that's nostalgia criticism is something you don't have to see new movies to be a critic. Some of the most fascinating stuff is when people go back and look at older films or they reappraise other things that came out years ago and maybe were forgotten. And kind of putting them in the proper context makes them even more fascinating. And that's something now that everybody has access to, like movies on YouTube, movies on Netflix, movies on DVD, movies on Blu-ray, movies that were forgotten, only played in one movie theater in LA for crying out loud. They're finally able to be appraised.
Like The Room?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, that's been appraised all along.
Yeah.
No, but on our site /comment, our biggest hits often are the films we review that are classic films. Carrie was motivated me to see a film, which I'll tell this story again, but she was aghast at one thing. I don't even know if you remember this, but you were aghast that I had not seen Mrs. Miniver, and you were like, you cannot be a film critic and have not seen Mrs. Miniver. And I had not seen Mrs. Miniver. It was kind of, forgive me, before my time, but Mr. Smith
It's
Goes
before
to
my
Washington.
time, too.
Yeah, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a favorite film of mine. And okay, so we just saw it, I reviewed it, and it got an amazing number of hits on our site. And I actually got a couple of emails from people. One that I'll never forget was a guy saying, why the hell did you review this movie that happened before you were born? And he could not understand this concept. And yet, obviously, for the same thing Dan said, these movies come around and come around and come around, and I got to tell you, Mrs. Miniver was amazing.
Well, now we're kind of unearthing all this stuff. It's like you can see literally almost anything from any country, anywhere, any time, any place now. Where before you would have to, the only place you could see a movie was in a movie theater. If you think about it, it was only in the 80s that we had VHS and Laserdisc, so we could actually watch movies in our home. And now we're to the point where you can watch a movie on your cell phone, and now they're mining anything they can find and put it out there. And I really love that people are reappraising these old movies and sort of putting them out there and kind of giving them the proper context because, it came out at a certain time. This was going on in France. You see this, and it kind of gives a lot of these visual essays where they kind of they made a whole movie out of the scene in Psycho. I mean, a movie is basically a...
And then they made a whole other movie out of Psycho.
Yeah. But it was just a movie about the sequence of the shower scene, and it was an hour and a half visual essay, and it was mind-blowing.
I have a question.
Excuse me, let me interrupt. Dan, it would be great if everything was available right now, but as Mike can probably tell you, and as I will tell you, when I try to do
there's a lot
video
more
essays or talk about a genre, movies by African-American filmmakers or on African-American themes, you can't find. Movies directed by women, can't find.
They're starting to get better, though.
Nah, Netflix used to have everything. Now they have bupkis.
Which, by the way,
there's just very little old stuff on Netflix in general. There's very little stuff from before.
Yeah, I mean...
But, YouTube, you'd be amazed what you find
on
YouTube.
But you can't always use it. And, I wrote for Yahoo Movies a lot, and I did a thing about jazz, and there's about 10 movies I wanted, and they weren't available.
Which, by the way, this is another reason, if you're interested in film criticism, it is one of the greatest perks, is we do get to see mainly what we see, I would qualify as 85% very questionable kind of things that you probably wouldn't pick to see. But occasionally you will see this gold nugget film that no one can see. It doesn't ever come out. It disappears. It doesn't get funding. One of the people we work with, Nathan, went to one of his things and saw one of the best films I've seen in the last 10 years called Closed Season. And this film has never gotten released. I just was glad to find that YouTube, you can now rent it for $2.99. It's a DVD quality, but it's a phenomenal film, and yet I got to see this. And my two best foreign films this past year, not eligible. They're not out yet. You can't see them, and they may never come out. And we've got countless examples of that.
I just need more information. because I mean, I love what I do. Just write these down just as recommendations. My favorite stuff. If you love movies, I like the dialogue that we're having about movies. And I love when we get together and just talk. I think that's where really the direction that criticism is. It's not Judith Chris telling you that Citizen Kane is a classic and giving you 20 pages on how great Orson Welles was neglected and all that stuff. It's more like, all right, why did you like this? What did you like? Okay, if you like that, then you would like this kind of thing. And then you start to see a wellspring of creativity that exists in that area that you might not be aware of. So, like Double Toasted is my subscription on YouTube. Like those guys, it's 4 guys and sometimes a woman, and they just talk about the latest movies. They review trailers, and it's just like it's not a clubhouse, but they're very informed because they started out as writers. I used to work in a video store, so when I discovered this documentary, Channel Z,
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I said, wow, this guy is like brilliant. I mean, basically in Los Angeles, the reason we have a Quentin Tarantino is because of Channel Z. It was when cable first hit, it was only available certain places, and this guy was obsessive. In LA.
Yeah.
In LA. It was only available in certain places, and this guy was a curator for Channel Z. He was obsessive. He tracked down movies that nobody else knew about, and he'd put them on, and people would stay up late at night and tape them. And Quentin Tarantino had access to all those tapes, so he just stole from every freaking movie that Channel Z ever put on. So shout out to Quentin Tarantino. But and Byron Allen while we're there, because he Kicking It launched this whole empire. Now we're getting screeners from entertainment studios. Yeah. So there's always that stuff. And then one more, so Channel Z documentary, and then I'll give you one more. Visions of Light is an amazing film.
About
if you can find
cinematography,
it, you can find it, it is like the whole history of American film told through pictures. So, I mean, those are things that I like. Why do you like movies, and what kind of things do you like to see?
Well, another one on YouTube, if you guys have not seen this, is Every Frame a Painting. Is an incredible YouTube channel. The guy really goes into why let's take a look at this particular film and we'll show you why this is a work of art. And you start to understand what the pieces are behind it.
Right, and frame by frame, I think, is on Netflix now. Keanu Reeves is talking about the transition from film
to digital,
digital, and talking to image makers about how that affects your emotional experience of film, but it's also it's a great film if you can get on.
I have a question for the audience. How many people, show of hands, like watching trailers? Good number. What do you guys think of trailers?
Well, about 10 years ago, the people who cut trailers decided that they had to tell you the whole story of the movie.
Yeah.
And I stopped liking trailers. I used to like them, but I stopped liking them because I didn't want to know the whole story before I walked in.
People come up to me all the time and say, well, what did you think of the trailer? And any of these guys can tell you, I avoid them like the plague. I'll
do a teaser, that's about it.
They'll preset your mind to a specific view, and you'll go into a film, and now you've got this mindset, and the film might take you on a different journey.
And you're waiting for a scene that you saw in the trailer that's not even in the movie.
That happens a lot.
Or a funny line.
So Downsizing, the Matt Damon film. I just wrote about this this phenomenon. Here's a top actor in a well-backed film, and the trailer, the initial original trailer, has 3 main scenes. 3, the funniest scenes. They do not exist in this film at all. And it's clear when you see this trailer that when they were making the trailer, they thought this film was a comedy, which it should have been.
It might have been better if it had been.
And the director decided, no, we need to make this a really, gut-punching, dark, I won't even say comedy. But
I thought it was okay. But
yeah.
I mean, it's like hitting you upside the head with an anvil, the messaging. But,
yeah.
But wait for the video on that one.
Yeah, that's a movie that really was a fascinating failure. Like a lot of bad movies are just bad and they're bad.
We do a
All
lot
they
of that.
had
Had a
to
lot of
do
ambition, but didn't really.
Was give Matt Damon a toothpick and have him fight an ant. That's all I wanted to see, and they didn't have it.
Yeah, it left a lot of possibilities on the table.
Big questions. This, by the way, is another thing that I want to point out. If you do get into this, there are a number of downsides. My wife can tell you one of them, which is we could be watching almost anything. God forbid it's Elementary, Sherlock Holmes. or virtually any story, we've seen it all. So a story will start out, and 3 minutes into it, I'll go, this guy killed that one, and this one's going to go there.
Gary Thompson and I have been playing this game for years, and whoever is right first gets a free meal.
and she'll turn to me and go, no, and I'm just wait. You know, the story is, I think they're out of ideas. I don't know, but
Well, Aristotle said there was only 35 plots.
Yeah.
There's another thing, the last thing I wanted to touch on, which is just to protect against. My background was in the multimedia industry, and I'm a tech guy. I came at this from the quality assurance industry, which my whole job, I'm the last guy you ever want to ask, how do I look in this dress? Because I'll give you a 17-page dissertation on the improvements you can make in the dress, totally missing the point.
Then I'd have thought you'd like Phantom Thread more than you did.
Yeah. So the bias that you can get from doing this. This is one of the things that I may get a difference with the rest of the panel. Coming at this not as a journalism major, but from the tech side, I took a look at this and went, how can I protect against this, what I perceive as bias? So many of the film critics I've talked to, and thankfully none of the guys here, they will see so many films that they're jaded. They will only want to see things that are original. And they forget
the other
that the viewer doesn't
sort
see
of thing behind
films.
that is it's clickbait. If you trash something, you're more likely to get hits rather than if you say how great it is and if you support it with a great opinion. A lot of these guys, especially internet critics, you'll see this on YouTube and a lot of the other people will just say, oh, this movie's horrible. Here's 10 reasons why this movie sucks. And people click the living bejesus out of that. But like they take, you gotta, Lou Gall told me once, you have to visit a movie where it lives. And that's the big thing about watching any movie. You have to sit down. If you're watching like a kid's movie, you have to watch it from the point of view of a child. If you're watching an action movie, you got to watch it with a sort of action sort of frame of mind. If you expect a movie to be something that it's not, you're always going to be disappointed. And a lot of these people that you're talking about, these film critics, they just hate everything. They get a ton of hits because people love to read that kind of like, stuff. But it just never sort of like, it's not cool at all.
Well, I think if you're at the point where you no longer get any joy out of being a film critic, you should probably stop being a film critic.
Yeah.
Stop seeing movies.
And it's fine to be negative, give negative reviews, but it's like, this is a fun thing to do. I am very grateful that I have a chance to do this. It's not my only job. I have about 6 different jobs, and being a film critic is only one of them, but I'm thankful that I get to do it, and I've gotten to do it for all this time, and I've gotten to, make money doing it from a lot of different companies over the years. And I've always said, if the day ever comes when I don't enjoy this anymore, I'm going to stop doing it. But
the last thing I'll say on that is the differing point of view is having the quality assurance background. I come at it when I'm writing a review or seeing a movie, I try to have in mind my audience. I know who my audience is. So I'm trying to think about what they're going to see. So for example, if I start writing about cinematography, I know I've lost 85% of my readers. If they are aware of cinematography, it's a bad thing. They just know a film is beautiful. And so the analogy
There's a way of talking about cinematography that doesn't.
That's what you do. So the analogy I come to is sort of the cake analogy. You two ways you could look at a cake. You've got the food critic who generally might get into the pan that was used and the ingredients that were used and the style that was used and the care that all went into it, when really 90% of the people reading the review want to know, how the hell does the cake taste? And that's what, to me, film readers, film fans are looking for is, what am I going to feel? Is this film going to reach out to me and make me feel something? My worst case, I'll end on this, is I hate when somebody will come up to me and go, how could you like that film? It made me feel sad. Or it made me feel this way. And then when you talk to them, you realize they don't want to feel anything. They want to go to a movie and feel nothing.
Well, no, I think people want to feel something, but I do know a lot of people who don't like movies with sad endings, only want happy endings. And America, or Hollywood, kind of did a lot to promote the happy ending and resolve conflicts. French movies never resolve conflicts. They end unresolved. But I know a lot of readers.
Well, we talked about 42, the Jackie Robinson film, and I read a lot of his biographies and his autobiography, and I saw this film, and in my review I called it a whitewashing. I called it 42, the Branch Rickey story. And, you know, this was to me just, if I were Jackie Robinson or his wife or any of his kids, I would be aghast at this film.
Well, the
And-
movie only told 1 year of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't tell how he got ulcers dealing with all the racists.
Yep.
It didn't tell how angry he was. That came
But
a little
the email
later.
I
Yeah.
got was from readers saying, well, I wouldn't want to see racism. I wouldn't want to go to a movie and see anything like that. And so I'm glad they showed me, and Stephen Ray was one of the guys who said they were going for a Disney-fied version, and they did it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I argue there are times that you want to go where the director wants to take you, and there are other times where it doesn't work.
I'll chime in on my personal agenda then, if we're talking about 42. I mean, that, you know, you have to look at where the money's coming from to finance anything. So 42, it is what it is at this point. It's reaction to Obama presidency, and isn't it great? Racism is over. Well, you know, I guess it's not. But if you really want to know Jackie Robinson, there's a great clip on YouTube of I think he's talking to Dick Cavett, where he actually, you see how his tone was. I mean, he had to be a certain kind of way just to play that role, but he actually articulates it very well that it wasn't just integrating Major League Baseball, but it was integrating the clubhouse, integrating the bullpen, integrating, like, everybody had to be on his side. It wasn't just, go, Jackie, yo, you got to take it like a man, you got to take it, you deal with all this racism, you know. It was really like, these guys, when you're in the flow of a baseball game, it's another form of communication, and that movie just had no way of being able to articulate that. But my agenda, I mean, especially working with Charles Woods on our podcast, I want people to go see every movie. I want people to just enjoy themselves, but there are a lot of movies that suck, and we just want them to be better. It's like, don't suck as bad. Don't waste my time. So we'll get into debates, and we'll get, you know, it's very interesting though. Like, I didn't like Detroit, but then there are other. Why don't you like it? You know, I had problems with Mr. Church. Charles loved it, you know, but it's really not only what the trailer presents, but what your mood is in when you go to see something. And I think a great film is a movie that you can watch now, and then you watch it 10 years from now, and you see something even greater than what you had imagined when you first saw it. Like Breakfast Club just came out on Criterion
yeah.
this week.
Criterion.
Criterion, which is
They had a deleted scene that they just found too, which was really cool. Yeah.
You know, I can't wait to see this on Criterion. I mean, I own like 5 copies of Breakfast Club. So, so you know, those are the kind of movies that I consider, like, you grow with them, and you see new. Like, I never understood Nashville. I can't that one I don't get. But Breakfast Club is my movie. I'll buy that 8 times, and I anticipate seeing more things in it as I grow older. I think that's the hallmark of a good movie.
That's movies that
And
change with time and deepen with time is a great movie.
And you can't place your own judgment on a movie. It's really, did it set out to do what it meant to do on its own terms? And that's to me is a key. You can't put Breakfast Club next to Citizen Kane, no,
Right.
but they're equally great in my view because they touch me the same way.
I have a question for the panel. Are there movies that you loved and saw years later and you thought, what drug was I on? And are there movies that you didn't like and realized, saw on TV or something, you think, oh, wow, I missed it?
I'll start with that. My wife and her sister and her mother brought up a film, and Robin Williams had just, I believe he had just passed away. And I got to write a nice piece for Broad Street Review on my recollection of all of his films. I was a big fan. But there was one film of his that just completely lost me. I didn't understand
Which one?
Why anyone would enjoy this film, and it's What Dreams May Come.
Which I love.
And, you know, so
I liked that at the time, and then
yeah,
no one liked it.
well, here's the perfect example. So they got me to, no, you need to sit down. And I went, no, I hate this film. I've seen it 3 times. I hadn't seen it in about a decade. We sat down and watched it, and I'm tearing. I think I lost 3 pounds.
I mean, I had such a fight with Bill Wine about that. I was like crying in it, and he said, "You're effing crazy." What a piece of, I love that movie. It's so visual, and it's a great
Well, you have
story.
to be careful with that too, because certain films, what we're kind of touching on to a degree, is do films hold up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another question. There are many films you'll see that you liked. The Poseidon Adventure was one of my favorites as a kid, and I can watch
The Mummy
it today
movies
and go,
do not
"What?"
hold up.
Yeah.
Except movies, I mean, movies stay the same, but we change and our culture changes.
Right.
So the movies change. And I remember the first time I realized that this happened, I saw, what was it, Murmur of the Heart in the early 70s when I was a teenager. And it's a movie in which, it's French, it's a Louis Malle movie, and the 14-year-old character is sexually initiated by his stepmom. And it didn't seem creepy to me in 1971. It seemed, oh, free love, blah, blah, blah. But when I saw it in 1988, when it was re-released, and I was a stepmom, I thought, this is child abuse.
Big has that effect on me too.
Big, oh yeah.
Which one?
Big with Tom Hanks.
Oh.
I got a lot of hate mail for my review of Whiplash.
Oh.
And, I grew up in a sports environment, and I had coaches that were exactly like J.K. Simmons' character in this amazing film. And Stephen Wright, in fact, was one of the people who, you know how quiet Stephen is, and he said, I have to tell you, I didn't agree with your...
Stephen Ray.
Yeah. Yeah, did I?
You said Stephen Wright.
Right.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. Slip of the tongue.
Yeah.
Again, that character just appealed to me where he went, boy, that was child abuse. And I had never thought of it from that perspective. To me, it's just the way you grow up. But
I think I'll offer up my two. My first one that I didn't like and that I ended up loving was, strangely enough, Inglourious Bastards by Tarantino, because I went in wanting a movie about the bastards because I'd seen the trailer, and Brad Pitt is Aldo Ray, they're going to kill some Nazis.
Yeah.
That's Man on the Mission movie. That's what I wanted. And there was so much more there, and I wasn't ready. I think that disconnect. And the other one would be Interstellar, which I went and saw, and I honestly didn't get it the first time. And then when I watched it later, it just clicked for me. Like,
I still don't get it.
well, see, that's the thing, though. It's not a movie about, like, a man trying to save the human race. It's about a man and his daughter. And once you've figured that out and you figure that's the thing that you need to keep, you can just throw away the rest.
Which I'm one step ahead of you. I threw it away.
I've noticed there are a lot of movies, and I'm in an age. I have two sons who are 5 and 7, and I've been going back and watching a lot of my favorite movies with them. And this hasn't really happened yet with any of my favorite movies, but I have noticed a lot lately that, like, you put on certain older movies, even from 10 or 15 years ago.
They're like comfort food.
Well, that's not really where I'm going. Which they can be comfort food, but like, you'll notice racial stuff and you'll notice gender stuff that is just really
Unacceptable now, yeah.
Oh,
just
hey,
like
go watch Eddie Murphy Raw, which is something I grew
all
up on.
anti-gay stuff. Yeah.
Oh my God! You watch it and go, am I a criminal? I used to enjoy this.
Oh, stop. Come on. 16 Candles, I'll stand up for that one, even though it's full of racial
Oh,
slurs.
Long Dick Dong? Are you kidding?
I mean, well, at the time, it was a job for the guy. I'm sure people recognize him today. He's in the 7-Eleven. Hey, you're Long Duck Dong. So, I mean, get over it.
I winced then and I wince now. I'm
I think
sorry.
he was just at Monster Mania, so he's still
12.
like living off
I mean,
it.
I enjoy the movie, but
I was 12, so I didn't know.
I liked it.
I was a little older.
Go back and watch Animal House. You got.
Oh, yeah, we were just
you
talking
got
about
you
that.
got John
Oof.
Belushi looking in on the woman getting dressed, and you got the scene with the.
I mean,
Mind
there's-
if we
there's-
dance with our dates, and that's a movie that I've loved for a long time. But you go back and watch it, I'm like, oh,
There's
that's-
literally just a rape scene in it, and
yeah.
a rape scene that at that time
Yeah.
everybody laughed at,
Yeah.
which
The angel, yeah. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys have
I think we're
questions
about
for us?
Q&A time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're Q&A time.
Yep.
Questions?
Probably to talk about.
Go.
What is it that you look for when you're looking for a movie? Like, I want to know what goes through your head. Is there like a list, criteria list that you go through? I need character development. I need linear.
Good question.
Well, you're not going to get character development in a lot of genre movies. Oh, sure. This woman asked, what do you look for when you go to a movie?
Do we have a list?
Do we have a list and you check things off? No, I mean, no. One of a movie I really like, 500 Days of Summer, is unlike every other rom-com I've ever seen because at the beginning you know that it doesn't last, and telling the story out of order gives it another shape. And if I had gone in saying I want it to conform to romantic comedy form, it doesn't. But I really, really liked it. So I think you have to wipe your mind of expectations and just take the movie on its own terms.
This is one of the places where I would argue vehemently that that's the place you want to let the film take you where it wants to go. Do any of you have a list? I definitely do not have a list when I go into it. You go into it kind of with that.
I mean,
open,
I mean, you want to be able to hear the dialogue, and you want
Yeah.
the camera in
Basic
focus. Yes.
Yeah.
The
But
3D lens has to be off.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue we could talk about of how a lot of movie theaters just don't exhibit films properly, and that's a big problem.
Yeah, we had a
Is it?
theater in the city that for years my co-writer, the right speaker, was out for almost a decade.
That was the A House in the
Yeah.
Ritz 5?
Yes. I wasn't going to name them, but and he would argue with them continuously.
I helped get that speaker
Yeah.
fixed.
Well, thank
So-
you, Carrie. Well, I just want to, I think whether or not I like a movie, oddly enough, it's a feeling. I usually, when the movie's over, I usually think, did I like it or did I not? And I can articulate why I didn't like it or why I didn't like it. And this is why I tried writing about music, and I couldn't really do it because I always found it hard to describe why I liked music or why I didn't like it. I could never say anything other than that's a good song, that's not a good song. I didn't know enough I didn't have the vocabulary for it. But with film, I can say that. But honestly, I work from there. If I enjoyed the movie and I felt right about it, then
What about
I
a
can
documentary? It's the one thing I can think of where I might have a little list, which is, did I feel like I learned something substantial? Did I take something away from this? So, for example, the movie Nixon from a number of years ago. I walked
The
out and
Oliver Stone movie?
Yeah, I learned nothing.
Oh,
There was nothing
something?
to be learned there.
I don't like Oliver Stone as a rule. I like some of his movies. But I never understood the relationship between Nixon and his brother until then, and that interested me. And I walked in, or once Anthony Hopkins, who plays Nixon, I saw him, I thought, this isn't going to work. And so he kind of got to me. So, who knows? So I did have an expectation that how can a Welsh actor like Anthony Hopkins play Nixon? But
Who didn't even try to do the nose right. And, sir?
All in the back.
Or you,
All of that?
you go.
Your last comment sort of dovetails into my question, which was, do you find that your feelings about certain actors, writers, or directors, strong feelings in either direction, get in the way of your review?
I know that I'm allergic to certain actors. I have a very a Jim Carrey hypersensitivity. I'm allergic to him. But then there's some movies of his I've really liked, like the Truman Show, and when he transcends Jim Carrey, I think he can be really good.
That's Will Ferrell
It's
for
a
me.
whole thing
Yeah.
about separating art from, the maker. I'm pretty good about that. I really try to take everything for what I see in front of me and try to divorce them of whatever scandals or whatever they've done. I try really hard.
Can you do that with Woody Allen?
That was tough for a while.
That was really hard when he made a movie about a man who was dating a woman and then he left her for her daughter. It's like, how? Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't
When you're
have
doing
made
that,
film.
you have to call it what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to a movie, if it's a director who I haven't liked their previous films, or an actor for that matter, I try to be fair to the film. I try to keep that in mind. If it's a movie where I never liked anything else the director did, but I like this movie, I'll say, oh, it's a pleasant surprise that this director has done this, or this director is growing, and same with actors. But
I'll give you.
But if I dislike the movie for the same reason that I disliked his other movies, I'll say that as well.
It's not just one person makes these movies. It's
That's true too, yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people sometimes put these movies together and put them in theaters, and you got to think about that sometimes.
The perfect example of this is Mel Gibson. What do you do with a Mel Gibson film? And when he did that Bear movie, he was I can't even remember the name
Beaver?
of that.
The Beaver, you mean?
Yeah,
The Beaver.
and nobody was in a mind to see Mel Gibson. So of course,
I actually kind of like that movie. It was
he's
so
Mad Max.
bizarre.
Right, but
He's
then
Mad
what was
Max.
the I'm drawing a blank. Heartbreak Ridge.
Or no, Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw, yeah, a
Hacksaw
wonderful
Ridge.
film. And you see this and you kind of it's always in the back of your mind. Mel Gibson. Oh, so that does kind of eat at you while you're watching the film, and you got to kind of put it out of people come in and I have a set of films that I own that I will show to people, and one of them is Apocalypto. And to me, it's an incredibly brilliant film. And then I've had people go, but it's Mel Gibson. and he's not in it. He just directed it, and but they just can't get over that.
I don't know. I won't say it. Never mind.
Well, the same issue hits with, say, Roman Polanski, or on and on and on, and they, you were up.
There's a series in Philadelphia called Talk Cinema.
Harlan.
I saw a movie there, and it was, I think, Chung King Express.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand any of it. You said there was some movie you didn't like it at all. I was happy. And the critic came out and he said, you really got to see this movie twice. And I thought to myself, that's nonsense.
I think
some movies are like that.
you shouldn't have to reread a book to get it. Sometimes it will improve. You'll understand more, but I think that you should be able to understand it, or part of it at least.
There
the
is a
first time
famous
around.
an exception to that. There is a very famous exception to that, which is Ebert's favorite. I mean, he gave a class on Citizen Kane, and I was lucky enough to actually have gotten to know Ebert through a series of misadventures in the tech sector. He was a big tech guy, and so Ebert was put out one year when I basically told him I didn't like a single film in his top 10 list. And these were all very, very classic films, and at the top of the list was Citizen Kane, and he said, I teach a class on that. And so he gave me this, you need to see it 8 times, Citizen Kane, 8 times. And I'll be damned if that man wasn't brilliant. I hated that movie for the first 4 or 5 viewings. Now I've seen it about 20 times, and I think it's one of the best films ever made.
Well, see, I think some films are so built on experiences, like Dunkirk, for example. It's such a visceral experience. You're sitting there, and the first time you're just taking it all in. It's just hitting you over and over and over again. The gunshots, the airplanes, that you miss so much. The second time you're watching it, you start to see the mechanisms that are falling together as the film progresses, and you're like, you just can't. Some films you have to watch more than once, because the first time it's just literally you're just taking in data. You just can't absorb it fast enough.
What's the Christopher Nolan Inception?
Yeah, Inception's like that too.
That's Inception is a very densely structured movie. I saw it the first time and I thought I didn't understand it, but I actually went home and really thought about it and figured it out. And the second time I saw it, I liked it much better.
So was he in a dream at the end?
We don't know, because
No,
the thing
I
is
think he wasn't,
spinning.
right?
Wouldn't you say the same thing, Carrie, about 2001?
Yeah, 2001.
I intentionally watch 2001 like every 10 years, and it gets better.
It does. There are certain
Or
films that
I understand it better.
Well, one film
But-
that I think, and first of all, I acknowledge that not everyone has the luxury of seeing a movie more than once, especially if it's a special one-shot deal showing, like I believe that you saw. But one film that I would recommend seeing more than once is the movie that we gave our Best Film of the Year award to, which is Get Out.
Yeah.
And that's a film where I watched it a second time, and there are about so many things that foreshadow things that come later, and it's just, you watch it again, you're like, oh
you're
yeah.
just laughing at it. And you're just taking it all in. And the second time you're like, oh, so that connects to here, that connects to there. Oh, that's why that happened. Oh, so that's why he did that. That's the hallmark of a great filmmaker.
Yeah.
It's the fact that
And the fact that it's a first-time filmmaker, and I know he did a lot of stuff on Key and Peele where he honed his sensibility, but that was impressive.
So who's next? Somebody pick somebody. I'm seeing half.
Is
the
there any
film.
on this side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Get Out, which I just saw recently, really liked. I just wonder from you guys, from your own point of view, obviously there's one female on the panel, one African American, does that sometimes, your own personal experience, affect how you review or see a film? I'll take an example for myself. I like the Predator film. Everybody seems to love the movie Crash. I didn't really care for it. I mean, it's got all that. I thought it was very much a white person's point of view about racism.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I didn't care for it. Get Out was African American written, was African American wrote it, and it felt more authentic. And I wouldn't have said that even not knowing who the director is. I just wondered,
I would say there's almost no way not to have that be a case. I mentioned that horrible film Frozen from 2011, and I ski. I know that ski lodges are open on the weekend, and so how could I not bring that to the review? And so it certainly sticks out more probably on a bad film. I don't know that we would notice it as much on a
Well, that's
good
kind of
film.
like finding somebody who you kind of agree with, and you're going to find that the more reviews you read, you're going to find out their background is similar to yours, or you see something in them that you kind of resonate with.
Yeah, that's why I recommend you find a reviewer you like and
Yeah,
stick with that.
except, there's a Ron Howard movie called The Paper, which is one of my favorite journalism movies. And in the last scene of The Paper, a tabloid newspaper has home delivery in Queens, and that would never happen. Tabloid newspapers you always buy at the newsstand. But that didn't make me like the movie any less.
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, how geeked out do you want to get with that? I mean, Crash, I mean, I had the privilege of seeing it in Denver with Don Cheadle in the audience, and I loved it. I was like, wow, this movie's brilliant. And I thought at the time that it was out, I thought it deserved all the accolades. But it is very heavy-handed, very blatant. It's just how hard do you want to shoot me now or wait till you get home kind of thing. So Get Out is a little more subtle, but for the time, I think it's perfect. I mean, and you can look at all the Oscar winners, and very few of them stand the test of time. It's just of the time. Like Forrest Gump would be a movie that I don't think I could sit through all the way.
I didn't like it then, and I don't like it
now. At the time,
now.
it was of the zeitgeist. It's like, wow, this is great. But it's just, how clever is it? Is it offering you stimulation or simulation? I guess would be the thing. Like Thor Ragnarok, I thought was fantastic this year because it was it constantly gives you twists and turns. It takes you all these different dimensions. Doctor Strange, I think Marvel does a great job with that. But the problem is it's over caffeinating the audience. Like it's almost like the audience almost demands for their $15 like a joy buzzer every 30 seconds, and sometimes that's
Where are you
too
paying
much.
$15?
Huh?
Where are you paying $15
I paid
for
to
the
see
movie?
Coco. I paid to see.
No, but where are you? No, I mean Philadelphia.
3D movies, $15.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, to sit through that
Because
terrible
the Philadelphia average for a movie is like $10.50.
Yeah, well, if you get the glasses, you got to pay a little more.
That's true.
If you get the leather seats, you pay more.
But I mean, you bring up like, okay, who's telling the story? What's the agenda? I mean, then you get into Detroit, which I hated, and I can't stand that movie, and I really.
You could not pay me to see that.
I can see right through what she's trying to do now, and I hate all of her work now because it's just so blatant.
You even hate Point Break?
I never saw Point Break.
Oh, it's so lovable.
Catherine Bigelow. No, I mean, but that's where it's a complete bait and switch, where they're promising you a movie about rebellion, and it's really about how the police oppressed and victimized all these people, and it was torture porn, and don't go see it, burn it. If you see a copy, steal it and throw it in the street.
Wow.
It really is a horrible film, and it's manipulative to the audience. And I think that's the one thing I don't like is the sense that I'm being manipulated while I'm in this dream state.
But
of
aren't
watching a
movies
film.
about manipulation?
That's
But I mean,
Well, see,
I don't like
that
to
brings
feel
me
like I'm being
around to my
manipulated.
point. If me being white guy, bald with a beard, I'm kind of homogenous in this whole thing. But like, if a film, I'm coming at it with my background, and if it can make me understand that and feel that, then it's done its job amazingly. Like Get Out, that movie just freaked me out. Like it did everything it was supposed to do.
That's sleight of hand. That's not like, okay, we're gonna take you into this room and now we're gonna just kill puppies for 20 minutes.
It's cheap manipulation that's bad. Not
It's like I don't like giving my
There's a lot more
self
to Get
a
Out
movie and then somebody just
than just
shoots
that.
it to their agenda.
There's
No,
a lot more
well,
to it.
clearly we're not talking about Get Out. That's
Yeah.
the
Catherine
film we
Bigelow's
all voted, right?
Detroit
Yeah.
is 45 minutes while 10
was
people
talking
are
about
getting
Get Out,
tortured,
though. Yeah.
and it's.
Well, and there's cheap. The one that I'm allergic to that I'm sure we probably all are, but I feel it. It's the thing that jumps out at me is cheap writing, the cheap trick, or so. Coming from the video games industry, you would have this. If anybody remembers the game Doom, they would have cheap jumps where monsters would come out after you turn a corner and walk forward. They would come out behind you and go boo. That's cheap. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of writing like that where they just go for something that's simple to do.
I mean, I don't
No.
know about you guys. I completely tune out on stuff like that. Like, I swear to you, I fell asleep on the last 2 Fast and Furious movies. Like, I'm just knocked out. The last Star Wars, I'm just knocked out. It's like if I can feel where it's going and it's just making it bigger and louder, I go to sleep.
I'll give you the one, and everybody can shout blasphemy on this is fine, because I'm the only one here, I think, that would probably have this view. Manchester by the Sea, I despised for the cheap writing, and the reason I say that is, once you get to the end of this film, you realize you've been had. Casey Affleck's character, no one supposedly understands what his issue is, and then you realize, no, you're the only one that didn't understand. Everyone in Manchester knew what his history was. They all knew. And
At least he wasn't under a sheet.
Ghost Story.
Good story.
Yeah.
The 4-minute pie scene film.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so that's the kind of thing that I really push back on. But anyway.
Well, I think that you are your perspectives. You bring your life experiences and perspectives to the movie that you see, and that's I think as a critic you owe it to yourself to seek out additional perspectives. But I'll tell you this: I saw Detroit, and when I first watched it, I liked it. And then, but honestly, I read.
You liked it because of her reputation going in. No.
Well, I mean, I was excited for it for that reason. But then, I read
The
a
minute
lot.
they killed the kid, I was out of there.
we're going to sell tickets.
Well, I mean, look,
They shot up the National Guard shot a kid 10 minutes into that movie, and you like that?
I didn't
Come
like
on.
that they did it. Obviously.
Come on.
You have a question?
No, but what I was going to say is I read a lot of black critics who said, this is
I'm just trying to save them.
and that
Yeah,
it changed how I thought about the film.
Over
All
here.
right, let's get some more questions.
Didn't win anything.
This
so
woman
No, it
here
did
has
not.
had her hand up for a long time.
Brick and mortar. I mean, I always love to go to the movies. I think there's a big difference between, it's really hard, I think, for me to see a movie and say that was a great movie or that wasn't. The difference between me watching it at home on a TV and not. And secondly, I'm finding that I'll say, did you go to movies, see anything? Most people, I mean, I'm a big movie person, but a lot of people were saying, no, nothing's really that good out there. That's what I hear a lot anymore from like the average person, not people who really love film. And I want to know, what do you think? Do you think that they're just not addressing, they're not touching?
Well, how do you define film would be the first question. I mean, like, is the film experience in the multiplex what you gauge everything on? Because there's so much happening everywhere else.
Netflix, original material, Hulu, Amazon, on and on. There's a lot of different venues.
Theater attendance is down quite a bit, and like I was speaking to the gentleman who runs the King of Prussia United Artists, and he said even Wonder Woman didn't sell out this summer. And I think it's because we're
Well, the Wonder Woman didn't sell out there because I had it on 6 screens.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is like they couldn't fill houses, and it's because of the fact that I believe that the content isn't quite as good as it could be. And I think there's just so much pulling your time away and pulling your attention away that it's hard to focus. But I do believe that you should see a movie in a theater. You should give the film the respect it deserves, give it 100%, because a lot of people like to have it on as background noise or whatever, but they don't see the same movie you saw, because it'll be funny because me and my wife will have a discussion about a movie. She'll have folded laundry during it, and I've watched it, and it's like we saw 2 different films.
Yeah.
But, that experience is like church to me.
As the data wonk here, I will tell you that one of the things I judge a year on is how long it takes me to get into the year before we have a 5-star film and how many 5-star films we have. And back in 2014, I was aghast that it took us until June to get to a 5-star film. And then in 2015, it was August. In 2016, it was October. In 2017, I didn't get there until
If you
November.
want to see good movies, you're going to have to go to
And-
festivals. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to.
See, I disagree. I think there is always something good playing. You might have to look far. You might have to go to an art house. You might even have to go to a second-run thing. But at any time during the year, there's always a good movie to see in the theater.
Let me just say there's so many things going on. I mean, first of all, there used to be a real difference between television and film. It's all filmed entertainment now. It's blurred. Some people really like following a character through a long arc. Movies won't give you that. Movies are 2.5 hours, and it's going to be a shorter arc. And I used to be one of those people who really didn't like watching TV for that reason, because I really didn't. I wanted other things to get from. A lot of episodic TV seemed to be plumped up and all about the character and not about the art of visual art. But yeah, there's stuff I see on TV now. Mad Men, The Crown, Stranger Things. I'm enjoying that. But a lot of people, there's something else happening. We don't have a bunch of film critics writing for our newspapers right now. There's not a lot of media that is paying attention to movies right now. That's a really important thing. It's all about television now, and there's just so much. We're overwhelmed by visual narratives everywhere, and it's so much easier to watch at home. I'm a brick and mortar girl too. A lot of people say, "Oh, I didn't like that movie," and I said, "I bet you saw it on TV." "Oh, but my TV is 48 inches." I said,
It's not the same.
It's not the same. I mean,
and now that you can get booze in theaters.
We look down. Yeah. Movies, we look up. If they're bigger than we are, we look up to it. I mean, and there's no appliances that, well, there are people who take their phones to movies now. But, I mean, really, movies, the room is dark. You're not even eating. The telephone doesn't ring. It's different.
What other question here? You didn't ask a question before, did you?
I didn't, no.
No. Oh, couldn't see you back there.
Okay, so I'm surprised it said October 2017. I thought Get Out came out way before this, and I thought there was a 5-star film.
Well, that was he's talking about 2014.
Oh, no, they said.
Yeah, and so I saw Get Out late. I did not see Get Out when it actually got released. I was at another screening, which happens often. Yeah. So I didn't get to see Get Out until later in the year.
So my question is, as a reviewer, for it's kind of like for filmmakers, so when they have, because there's no, said you don't really follow a rubric itself. You said what you by what you judge a film. Do you find that the films that you find most gratifying and most best done films really stick to the convention of their genre? Like how horror has specific conventions that it must or it should hit to be classified as horror or thriller or suspense, Do you find that they stick really closely to that?
I tend to not even care about what the genre is set as. I take the film as it hits me. So, people, I don't like that Get Out, for example, is classified as a horror. There was another film.
The Golden Globes called it a comedy.
Yeah, yeah. And so my editor takes great issue with this, that IMDb will classify a film a certain way, and he just gets anal about exactly what this film is. So there's a personal feel for what the film is. I'm
a big genre guy, so I pay attention to genres, and I love when films kind of circumvent that. Personal Shopper with Kristen Stewart was a big one for me because it started out as kind of a drama and turned into a ghost story. I mean, I love, because you got to understand with certain genres, there's certain conventions and there's certain things, because like we've talked about, there's only so many movies been made about so many plots, so you kind of expect certain things to happen. So I like when they either throw in something different or there's a twist, or they kind of like, because you still got to play Hallmark and pay your homage to your genres. And to add something new or put a twist on there, I think, and make it seem organic or feel like it belongs, I give kudos for that. So,
yeah. And, just real quick, when I was in film school, they're training us to be directors. They said the first thing the audience wants is to know that they're in good hands, right? So within the first 5 or 10 minutes, if you just feel like you're in the midst of a story, like Baby Driver is a perfect example. It falls apart at the end, but for the first hour, that movie is incredible, and it's sort of like it just adds on to the whole. I just respect who's the director?
Edgar Wright.
Yeah,
Edgar Wright. I respect him even more because he used his power and took a chance. He's not just giving you spoon feeding what you expect. But Yeah, I think the audience. The problem with Hollywood is that they have to appeal to the masses, right? And we are individual human beings, individual organisms. So now, as the atom fragments more, we want the movies to speak more to us, not to project an ideal. And I think that's really where we are. Like if you go to a movie theater, you want that connection, but you can make that connection in a lot of different places now. So that's why I asked, like, how do you define film? But I agree with you that there's always something, but it just can't be like mass marketed. Like if I'm in the mood for McDonald's, I'll go to McDonald's. I'll have a good time, but don't sell it to me for $15 and tell me that it's
Cuisine.
steak. And then I'm out of there. I'm gonna stay home and watch Netflix.
We have one more, and then we've got it.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Hi. I recently watched Five Came Back.
Ah.
Oh yeah.
Directors who joined the war effort.
It's great.
Two, and it was great timing because the holidays were coming around, and I had the opportunity to watch It's a Wonderful Life, which never particularly interested me in the context of knowing that Frank Capra had just come back from.
And Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah. Seismic effort, it just framed it in an entirely different light, and it felt like a completely new film watching experience. And I tend to like backstories. I can appreciate the interest in things like The Room, but I'm curious if there's any film that you find has a lesser known backstory or a fascinating context, or just something in the vein of that story of Frank Capra that might make it worth revisiting.
Casablanca. And there's a really good book about it called, it's by Noah Eisenberg, and it really goes into the World War II era, having all these immigrants displaced, and how Casablanca just crystallized so many things. And it almost didn't happen, and it almost was starred, Hedy Lamarr turned down the Ingrid Bergman part, but it almost starred Ronald Reagan and Ann Sheridan, and that wouldn't have been right, even though Ann Sheridan is wonderful. It's a great book that walks you through the movie. That's top of my head.
I've got one. Stoker. So Stoker is a film by Chan Wook Park. And I got a chance to interview him about the film. And the interesting part about that was there was a production guy there at the screening, and 20 minutes into the film, the projector died. And so we walked out, and basically there were like 6 of us, sitting there waiting for them to get done with the, whatever's going to happen. And we all were comparing notes, and each one of us were commenting about how the hair on the back of our neck was standing up, but none of us knew why. We're watching this film, and we were uncomfortable, but nobody could put a finger on why. So that was my question for Wook Park, and he basically said, I'm so glad you brought that up. We spent a fortune on hiring psychologists and psychiatrists to give us feedback on every element you see and hear. The wallpaper, the clothing they're wearing, the shoes they have, the hairstyles, the makeup, the lighting, the way it changes, every piece of everything that you see in that film, they got this feedback to make you uncomfortable, and it works. Many people may not like we show films, we'll show it at our home, and people will see this and go, "My God, I have a practical migraine." It's that stressful, and you can't really say why. So that's to me an interesting backstory in a film most people don't know.
I would say Heaven's Gate with Chris Christopherson.
Oh, the Stephen Bach book is fantastic.
Yeah. That book is like.
What's it called?
What's Final Cut?
Final Cut. Oh, it's fantastic.
Basically, the guy who did The Deer Hunter, it was his next movie. So they gave him a ton of money. They gave him like carte blanche to do whatever he wanted, and then he just spent it was Orion.
It was UA.
It was UA.
It was
United Artists. He basically bankrupted United Artists, and it gets into this whole like insanity of him like fighting with the studio, fighting with his actors, locking himself, hiding the film print because they said they were going to confiscate it and re-edit it. And
the guy who wrote it, Stephen Bach, was a producer sent to watch the production for United Artists. And it's fantastic. Except I don't know if the movie is worth it.
There's a lot of
great backstory, but I don't know if the story is worth it.
I guess it's a lost art. But if you're interested in those kind of things, Devil's Candy is a great book.
Oh,
I
yes.
was just
Yeah.
thinking of that. It's
That was
again
the
about a
making of
movie you don't want to
Bonfire of the-
see. It's
Bonfire
about
of Vanity.
Bonfire at the Vanity. Julie Salomon's book about
And then,
Bonfire of the
and then there's a book about the making of Lady in the Water, which is another.
Oh,
sort of
Michael
interesting-
Bamberger's book is fantastic. All of these are movies that
Yeah.
are probably not worth seeing, but
But I will close this with a shameless plug. You got to come, everybody. This Friday, we're going to show Graffiti Bridge.
oh my God,
Prince,
the
yeah.
best Prince concert movie.
No, it's not a concert movie. It's
That's
his,
Sign of the Times is the concert one.
it's his
I just
extended.
watched last week.
It's an extended music video.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But we're gonna dissect it a little bit. We're showing it Friday at the Bank Building, 3750 Lancaster, and we have the privilege. I spoke to the cinematographer of the movie, who also shot Jaws. Can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me. But we talked to him. It's online if you can't make it. Him talking about working with Prince, and then also I was at the premiere. New York with Prince in the back of the room watching this fiasco happen. So we'll do a little inside baseball on Graffiti Bridge this Friday. It's for pay what you want. You can pay what you want, and it should be interesting. It's been remastered in Blu-ray, so it'll be really interesting to look at that movie again. I haven't seen it since it came out, not in its entirety. So
I just have to say, I was at the old Boyd, I guess, what was it called, the Sam Eric 4?
Sam Eric.
Yeah.
In the big house, watching Under the Cherry Moon, and he was in
The balcony.
up in the balcony
Mezzanine.
watching it,
wow.
and it's the closest I ever came to him. It was fantastic.
All right. Well, we'll all have Prince stories to share.
I grew up in Minneapolis, and sadly, I never met Prince. So
So
all my friends have Prince stories. I sadly have none. But
well, I was front row center at the Prince concert, but that's just me. But that's Prince's magic, and yeah, this was fun.
Just don't forget to find
course,
Find Film Scribes, our podcast. Please
Yes.
do listen and subscribe and like it. We would greatly appreciate it.
Speaking with you guys, I should rephrase mine. This was fun, right?
yes,
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
We'll talk to you after.
Yes.
He's got to give him.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I mean, I have 1,000 questions, but I really just wanted to say that I love movies. I believe that a movie you thoroughly enjoy needs to be seen inside a movie theater. You can watch it at home, but you have to be alone. It has to be dark, so you actually run to that place. But what I really want to say is you mentioned about trailers. I love trailers, and I love film critics. I don't.
So you're the one.
Thank you.
I read most of Carrie's, and I've read some of the others, some of the other gentlemen, but they're important. They're the gauge for me to use. It doesn't mean I agree all the time, but I really look because I know that there is passion and love for what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for
We
coming.
got to stop. But Trailers from Hell is a YouTube channel. Joe Dante and John Landis run it, and they have directors commenting on their favorite movies, and you'll discover movies. You'll see movies in a different way. Trailers from Hell. It's on YouTube. It's for free. So.
All right. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thematic question, because I think it's something really that didn't get touched on. But I had the privilege of going to the Critics' Choice Awards a couple times because I lived out in LA, and I was just wondering how you get selected for that, and how you make this a career, and how many years it takes you financially, until it's financially lucrative.
For the Critics' Choice Awards or for just in general?
Both.
Both? Well, the Critics' Choice Awards is the Broadcast Critics Association, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think any of us are in that, or do you? No. Just to be a critic, I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years, and it's one thing you have to realize: there are very few people where it's their only job. It's probably a very small group of people where being a film critic is their primary career, and they make a living doing only that.
It's my only job, but I'm making about a third of what I used to make when I was at the Inquirer.
As I said at the beginning, I used to make six figures writing, and now I couldn't pay the mortgage if I tried. And so
But we get cool books and
totally different.
DVDs.
Yeah. So yeah, if you have more questions, come up and ask us. So, thank you.
Just throw money. We need money. We need money.